Well, my name is Robert Freeland. I'm from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. I'm a professor down there. And I've been working with Barry Allred for, I guess, close to 15 years, mapping tile drains. He could not be here today. He was supposed to give the talk, but he had a family emergency, so I'm kind of stepping in trying to do the best. The research rationale that he gives for doing the research is you have 31 million acres up here in the Midwest containing drainage systems, and sometimes I understand you lose your maps. Maps are lost and tile drains are lost and whatever. We don't have any tile drains. There are very few tile drains down in Tennessee, so I'm going by what Barry tells me. And I understand that sometimes you need to locate your tile drains. Either they start to fail, or you want to improve them, or you want to install new tile drains. Also, the research rationale is environmental. Tennessee's on this map, but the pollutant plume coming down, you need to have some access of where your drain pipe locations are. Your traditional methods. I have never used a tile probe to find tiles. I have used a tile probe to find graves. I use ground penetrating radar quite a bit in cemeteries, and we use a tile probe all the time. And I would feel sorry for someone having to map out tile drains with a tile probe. I always thought it was kind of dangerous if the handle broke. But that's one way to do it, the traditional way to do it. The other way to do it, I understand, is you can dig up. You destroy the tile that way. You have to repair it. I've never done this either. I have tried to locate fissures, earthquake fissures in a 500-acre field, digging them up, and you make a mess. So this is probably not a desirable way to do it either. And so Barry had the idea of using ground-penetrating radar 15 years ago to get away from using a tile probe to do remote sensing. And he started out with this little push cart, like John was talking about. It's like a lawnmower. You just push across the ground. It puts radar in the ground, and you get reflections back, and you see the tile. Pretty nice idea that he had. And he had success on some plot scale at OSU. You could move it across the ground. You could see the tiles. You could map it out. You can lay a tile drain. Sound pretty good. However, its success is a function of the soil type. If you have wet clay, not going to work very well. Dry sand, it works pretty good. Wet clay, not going to work very well. The antenna frequency, you got to have the right antenna frequency. It takes a lot of computer processing to do this, to analyze the data and map it out. If you have perched water, it masks the tile. If you have any sort of ground surface characteristics that can mask the image, the deeper the tile is, the harder it is to find. The smaller diameter it is, the harder it is to find on ground penetrating radar. And you have some field measurement equipment parameters. All this is well known because when Barry and I started doing this, we rapidly went to a golf course. Golf course has tile drains. It has a corrugated pipe. This shows PVC pipe. And we were in GPR heaven. Not only because the environment was nice. Now, this last summer, I spent the summer staring up at a drone in a cotton field. That was not nice. On a golf course, it's nice. Doing research on a golf course is very, very nice. You have to dodge golf balls every now and then, but it's very nice. But on a golf course, there's what's called USDA standards that they have to construct a golf course, the putting green by. And so you can take ground penetrating radar out there, and you can discover everything about a golf course. If you're in drainage tile research on sports fields, turf, high-quality turf, football fields, I've done football fields, golf courses, soccer fields, baseball fields, anything that has drainage under it, high-quality turf, high-dollar turf, ground-penetrating radars is the way to go. It's just established now. And Barry and I were involved in this when it was started. What really kicked it off was not the ground-penetrating radar. It was, instead of having to use a wheel encoder to map out your location or use differential GPS, which is sub-meter, when we hooked up RTK, which was sub-centimeter, we got some beautiful images with ground tile. And so you had to know the exact location in order to generate the images. So, figured it out. Golf courses, RTK, GPR, works great. Trying to scale it up to the farm. Trying to scale it up to 500 acres. I have never mapped 500 acres of ground tile. I have mapped 500 acres of earthquake fissures with an apparatus, with a cart, with an antenna behind it. It is not fun. Okay, I look at this. You want me to map this? I can imagine 1,000 acres. 50, it's just, it's unbelievable. You spend days and days doing 10-foot transects going back and forth. And that's not the bad part. The bad part is processing the data. Getting the data and picking tiles out and mapping them, or in my case, fissures. It is very, very time consuming. So going from the smallest plot scale to the farm scale was the problem with using GPR. It could possibly be done with enough money and enough equipment, enough technology, but right now it's just not feasible to go with ground penetrating radar. And so we had the idea of looking at aerial imagery. Looking at the farmlands up here in Ohio, you get on Google Earth, every now and then you can see some tiles. Ever notice that? You can scroll through there and you see some tiles. You can do the historical image, the clock up there, and scroll back, there's a tile. Now sometimes you can see it, sometimes you can't see it. Why is it sometimes you can see it, why is it sometimes you can't see it? Say again?
Different water for the growing season.
Growing season, right. Now Barry had his research technician this last spring use Google Earth Pro, NASA Whirlwind, Earth Browser, Zoom Earth, Bing Maps, and Marble. He looked at all these, and when were you able to see the drainage pipes, drainage tiles, and where were you not? What was going on? Now here's some examples of when you can see them. All right. They just pop right up. And if everybody could do this, it's fantastic. Now what's going on here? Well, the first thing you noticed was it was in the spring. Now some people say that you can see it with a crop on there and the crop's growing better in certain places. You can see the tile. Where you can really see it, early spring, right after rain, there's some drainage, and this is the kicker, no residue. That's the kicker, no residue. So here's some, these are from Google Earth, and just happened to catch it at the right time, saw it. So if it's at the right time, but we need a field, how can we get it? And so instead of having Google Earth do it for us or finding another product or aerial image it, why not just capture it with a drone? Fly it with a drone, fly at the right time, and capture it. So that's what our research is doing now. Now, when you look at Google Earth, not all the time that you see something that looks like a drain tile or drain pattern is. So you have to be careful. I mean, you guys are drainage experts. You know the correct spacing. You need to go to a drainage point. You look in on it and you see an equipment turn. You know that that's not drain tile. So you got to have some, little bit of interpretation of the map. So not all parallel features are drain maps. Now, this is where I come in. Like I say, down in Tennessee, we have very few, if any, well, along the river we have some drain tiles, but very few drainage. We're doing remote sensing mapping. We're doing it for replanting decisions, nutrient deficiencies, insect disease detections, drainage issues. So if we have a wet spot in the field, we detect that. This is a big one. This is what's really coming out now is crop insurance claims. You fly the field, got a picture of your crop, you have a damage, fly it again, you have a crop insurance claim. So, yes, this is the biggie for drones right now, crop insurance. Probably the way from talking to the pros in it. Variable rate, crop inputs, yield estimation, soil vegetation, moisture monitoring. We do the red is bad, green is good maps, and we're just trying to figure out how to do something with that. Yes, red is bad, green is good, but that's our research right now. Our fleet, we have two different types of vehicles. We have the quadcopter and we have the fixed wing. The quadcopter is great if you want pretty pictures. If you want something to put on a poster, if you want something to advertise to a client, you use the data from the quadcopter. You're flying low. We typically fly 30 meters. You got a nice camera on there. This thing is very heavy. The battery on it's the size of a brick. Very high resolution camera. It makes beautiful NVDI images. I mean, all the beautiful crop. this one is how you do it. The problem is it's slow, and you're not going to cover a lot of acreage. If you're in production, you're not going to use a quadcopter to map your fields. It's just too slow and probably too low for you. We typically fly 30 meters with a quadcopter. Now, what's nice about it, you don't have the problem here in Ohio, but in Tennessee we have a lot of trees around our fields, so you got to go straight up and straight down. You don't have a place to land. Quadcopter can go up, come straight down. It's less expensive, so you can get some fairly inexpensive quadcopters. But what you're seeing in ag now, what's really going in ag, if you want to map the large acreages fast, is a fixed wing. And so our fixed wing is we have a lower end model. They actually have a higher end model now. It does even more capacity. But you launch it by hand. You just simply flip it up in the air. It has a very longer flight time than a quadcopter, so you can cover a lot more area, a lot faster. It's fully automated. I fly these things all the time, and you program it on the computer. You flip it up in the air, and it comes back where you tell it to land. It does its surveying. It has minimal maintenance. However, it's very expensive. Typically, the fixed wing is much more expensive than the quadcopter. This is my last flight that we did back in February. I was wanting to map some cold soils. In Tennessee, it was 72 degrees on this day, so I didn't get my cold soils. But this is the track. The flight was at 100 meters. The photographs were almost video. The camera I was using to do this was not the snapshots that you normally would see. On 135 acres, it took over 7,000 photographs. On a typical NDVI image or a RGB map, you'd probably see 700 images. This was 7,000. If you ever seen one of these things fly, they look just like buzzards. I saw some buzzards out here flying. Your buzzards fly lower than our buzzards. Our buzzards are up about 100 meters, same as the flight of this thing. They look just like a buzzard. I've been tracking my plane, and I'm tracking a buzzard going back and forth. You can't hear the noise. They look just like buzzards. This is the data when you post-process it. Each of those red dots is a photograph. And the way the computer works is that in every photograph, it tries to find one dot, one point on the ground, and match it. So in all those images, the computer is trying to find it. In all those images, one pixel on the ground. And it recreates that pixel. A lot of people think that it's stitching, like you take a lot of individual photographs and you cut them and you kind of paste them together. No, it's totally reconstructing a new image from all these other images. By doing it this way, it can get 3 dimensions. So you can get some very high resolution 3-dimensional data. So all the pictures that have this one point in the field, they're used to recreate this one point and create a new image. This is a camera that Barry and I are using to map or trying to map drain tile. It's a thermal infrared camera. It senses between the 7 and the 13, micrometer wavelength up in the infrared. This is about the size of your hand, the camera, and it fits in the back of the drone pointing down. Now, infrared heat sensing is different than visual. If you look at it in the infrared spectrum, this guy's got his hand up in a black plastic garbage bag. If you notice, it's transparent in the infrared, but his glasses are opaque, doesn't go through there. So things look different infrared than visually. So this is the same data set that we had with the thermal camera, and it's going through, and the computer is processing the image. Each of those pixels is recreated from the rest of them. It takes a lot of horsepower. The computer to do this, it takes 12 hours, and it's very intensive. On the left is the thermal map, and on the right is the RGB map. The left was flown with a thermal camera, and immediately after that we flew it with a Sequoia camera. Any of those use a Sequoia NDVI camera recreated? If you've been to the Mile and Field Day in Tennessee, this is the parking lot of the Mile and Field Day. Here's a truck with the engine running. And notice how dark it is there? That's because in the infrared, you have to deal with sunlight. The sunlight, that's the radiation, the heat being reflected back is in the image. And so this is reflected heat. Now, if we just zoomed in on this black area and told to display it, it would normalize the image and you could see it. But since it's having to normalize for the entire image, it's having to take into the effect of the direct infrared energy coming from the sun. And this is sloping downhill. And so you could sort of like being in the shade, but it's not in the shade. It's just that the amount of infrared energy being reflected back from the sunlight is not as strong on the slope as it is where it's flat. And visually, you can see just fine. In the thermal, I did not add the false color here, but white is hot, black is cold. The maps come out calibrated, and they have a grayscale, and they're rated in degrees C. The camera can give, I think, accuracy up to 1/10 of a degree C. Here's a field in the RGB. Again, we don't have any drain tiles yet. I've not flown up in Ohio. This is RGB with a Sequoia camera. And with the thermal camera. What really stands out here is residue. There are some white spots here. I don't know if you can tell from there, but see these white spots in the field? I thought, well, those could be fire ant hose, fire ant mounds. They could be what? I mean, residue? You're getting close. Okay, this is a research site that had corn, cotton, and soybean residue. And some of the worst, the cotton and the corn residue interfered the most. The soybean residue interfered the least. And these white spots is where the research associate pulled up the header, because the header was on soybean harvesting, and he lifted it up. And those white spots are simply 4 to 6 inches of soybean stubble in those spots. So that is the difference that residue is having the effect on the temperature reading. We went out to the field and we scraped away the residue. Now, it's 72 degrees on this day in February. Scraped away the residue. It was 10 degrees cooler underneath the residue than on top of the residue. Okay, the residue is drier. Think of soil. Our theory on this is that dry soil is going to be warmer, and cold soil is going to be, or wet soil is going to be colder. That makes sense? Water acts as a capacitor to heat, and so the wet soil will hold the heat, or be slower to cool up in the morning. In the afternoon, you'll have the inverse of that. The dry soil will cool off faster, and the wet soil will stay warm longer. So you'll have the flip of it in the afternoon. So that's our theory. On using the thermal camera, is what we're trying to do is map soil temperature where water moisture affects the temperature of the soil across the field. Now, the satellite imagery. We've not done the satellite imagery yet, but Jonathan Thine at Illinois State, he has tried this approach. He's looking at Landsat imagery, the shortwave infrared, I believe that's what it is, approach. And what he has is he has imagery of when it is dry. And then he waits after a heavy rainstorm, a couple of days, and looks at the same spot, same imagery. If there is no change, that means it's going back to being dry. It was wet, it's going back to being dry. There's no change from when it was dry. And so that area he's classifying as probably being tiled. Now, if there's change, if it was dry and you had a heavy rainstorm event, 2 days later it still has change to it, that means that it's wet, which means it is not probably tiled. So he's come up with a scale, and the scale is not drained, which is the light purple, to definitely drained, which is the gray. That's been his approach using satellite imagery. Okay. So that's where we stand on using aerial imagery on mapping tiles.